Hello, and in this edition of Who's Views Reviews, we're going back to 1983 with a little bit of 1977 sort of thrown in possibly maybe. Also. Then we're investigating a spaceship, a mysterious spaceship that is flying through infinity. The Fifth Doctor is going to meet an old friend. He's going to get hounded from the shadows by an old enemy. Oh, and there's a guy with spaghetti on his face. Hello and welcome, and as you can see, here is the Who-tastic panel. Hello, Who-tastic panel. How are you all?
Hello everyone.
Hello.
Oh, isn't it so exciting? We are also excited to be reviewing 1983's Mawdryn Undead, which, of course, very soon will be released as the season 20 box set. Yes, we plan things this far ahead here on the show, and no one can tell us anything different.
We're untouchable. We're untouchable when it comes to coincidence.
You are very welcome. Thank you for tuning in to watch us here on the reviews. Yes, we're going to be looking at season 20's Mawdryn Undead. So, Mawdryn Undead, everybody. Story 3 in the season 20. Who's going to kick us off with their recollections? How about you, Time Muddler? Yes.
Well, I was about 13, 14. I was all excited. This was the season, it'd been billed as an enemy or a villain every episode. You know, you thought, oh, this is just going to be, like a sweet shot for Doctor Who fans. And obviously we'd had Omega being quite static. We then had the Mara. It wasn't quite my thing, the Mara, because of course it's all quite surreal. So I was waiting for something to really happen. And I thought the Black Guardian, well, yeah, that's right up my street after Key to Time. And I don't know, I was underwhelmed by Mawdryn Undead. I was underwhelmed by the use of the Black Guardian, very static. I was underwhelmed by the use of Davison. No wonder he resigned after this season. I was underwhelmed by the actual mutants that didn't look anything like mutants. I was underwhelmed. To me, it was a blancmange of a story. It was a glory of pastel colours, but the pastel colours meant the script and the story and the ideas weren't sharp.
Have you swallowed a poetry book while you've been off the air?
I think
a blancmange. Oh, well, that's disappointing. All right, well, thanks for joining us. Bye. That was a thing for a few. Oh, come on. Surely I'm not the only one on the panel, on the Who-tastic panel, that actually enjoys Mawdryn Undead to this very day. Come on then, John.
I enjoy it. Yes, I enjoy it.
Yeah. This was my favourite story of season 20. Barnum, head and shoulders above them all. And when I was preparing for tonight's review, I didn't know how to tackle it, whether or not I should wear my Brigadier's moustache, whether I should wear the old school tie for trouble,
you see,
or if I was just going to pour this lot over my head, in tribute.
Can we have which one you can do now, John? Can you put the spaghetti on your head now?
I'll do that at the end if as a big finale. But I'm disappointed that Brendan was underwhelmed. I was overwhelmed because, as we said in the previous review, I was lucky enough to be at a convention when John Nathan Turner announced the return of Nicholas Courtney in this story. And I was agog from that announcement and eagerly anticipated for all those months. When it landed, it didn't disappoint. Yeah, as we get into the weeds of this again, we can pick out things we didn't like. Peter Moffat, but this was head and shoulders above everything else that season. And I have to disagree with the Time Muddler here. I think had there been more stories like this, Peter Davison might have hung around longer.
Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Okay, so let's go to Captain Yates. I'm sorry, Bedwyr. The reason I say that, Who viewers, is look at his t-shirt. He's dressed up tonight as one version of Unit, because there's several versions, as we all know, and it's getting worse by the minute. But this one seems to be a traditional one.
Points for anyone in the comments who can name what episode
the Brigadier actually wore this because I can't.
Oh, well, there you go. No
Yeah.
prizes, just to make clear.
It's fabulous.
So my recollections of Mawdryn Undead, I mean, I was purchasing the videos, and my first experience would have been watching it on video. I wouldn't have got the trilogy because I would have got them at various points. So it wouldn't have occurred to me that this was the first part of a trilogy with Terminus and Enlightenment. And when I eventually watched them chronologically in order, it would have been on DVD. Yeah. I have problems with it. I like some of the ideas in it.
Okay.
I think it's a bit of a mess, a bit like Peter Grimwade's Time Flight, but it's got the Brigadier in it, and it's great to have Nicholas Courtney back.
Well, it certainly is. It certainly is. Paul, before we start looking at this, do you remember how this? Because it's interesting that we're there, and a lot of the fans that came to it afterwards, it's now referred to as the Black Guardian trilogy, isn't it? Or this intellect. It never was back in the day. Do you remember? Because what we got when this came out was we got the usual Radio Times back page, which was that lovely. So that's actually my copy there on the left-hand side. And it was split into 4 episodes, as we know. First broadcast on BBC One here in the UK between the 1st and the 9th of February, over a couple of weeks there. And you can see some of the schedule there for you. But it was never, ever sold as the Black Guardian trilogy, was it? I mean, the whole thing about season 20, as we all know, is that producer John Nathan Turner, God love him, he wanted something from the Doctor's past all the way through season 20, and that was achieved, as we've talked on our Merchandise Paradise season 20 box set. So in this particular story, you've got the Brigadier and you've got the Black Guardian, so you're actually getting a couple of elements there. But Paul, it was never sold as a Black Guardian trilogy, was it, back then?
No, it wasn't. When I saw it originally, I was trying to think my age. How was I? I was 16 at this point, and this is when I started recording it. I stopped counting, John. And this is when my first season. I said I started recording on the old gas VCR, and I really liked this story at the time, but I had no idea that the Black Guardian was in it or was going to be in a trilogy. That was news to me. I agree what Bedware said about it's a bit of a mess. I think the story, there's some great elements in it. I prefer Time Flight to this, I have to say, but I've got appalling taste. But I think having the Brigadier back was great, and it's really good that they used him not as the unit Brigadier. We'll get back to the dating later, but I think using him as the teacher was quite unusual. I know it was a kind of a fait accompli because you couldn't get William Russell to play the teacher in it. But I do think having him in it worked really well. And I couldn't see anyone else playing the teacher in it other than Nicholas Courtney as the Brigadier. So I love elements of it, but it's a bit of a mess.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the fact that you brought up the story of it there. I mean, this whole story revolves around 2 different points in time. There's 1983, there's 1977, as we know. Now, as a 13-year-old in 1983 watching this, I actually find the 1977 element made perfect sense. Yes, as a fan, I was thinking, hang on a minute. Okay, where does this come in the Brigadier's younger timeline? But also from my point of view as well, I just thought, okay, I'm not actually that bothered if I care. But of course, that's opened up a whole other conversation. Do you remember, for those of you that saw it live at the time, do you remember did you have that awareness or not?
I had that awareness, but I didn't care. That sort of canon doesn't keep me awake at night, and nor should it. Obviously, the dates were important, were integral to the story, to have the 2 time zones. Had it been Ian Chesterton, it would have mattered. Had it been the second choice, Harry Sullivan, it also wouldn't have mattered. Not much, mind you, although there might have been a bit of debate about the unit thing. But although it was Nicholas Courtney, I was just happy to have the Brigadier back. And for the 0.1% of the population who are Doctor Who fans watching this, to be wrapped up in that might have been a thing, but for the rest of the population, just the glory of having this legacy character back in his glory and an integral part of the plot and not just a cameo was all that mattered.
But the problem was, I mean, I don't hate the story. I just find there's a lot of problematic moments in it. Bringing the Brigadier back, fantastic. The dates wise at the time, as a younger fan, it didn't bother me. Obviously, if you really look at Doctor Who canon, it's like spaghetti. It's all a mess, really. So the dating issue, yes, I was aware of it more afterwards when some fans really kicked off about it and said, "Oh, you've done all that." Bringing the Brigadier back was really. I mean, when I mentioned the comment about it was Davison was undersold here, this story is all about the Brigadier. It's a Brigadier story. So all the reasons why we like Nick Courtney are to the fore here. And, you know, he was challenged playing two elements of himself. But
do you think that's why, Brendan, is that why you say it's a Brigadier story? Because he's doing the two different time versions of himself?
As an actor and as a character, he's the one to the fore in this story. That's what I mean. You know, we can talk about the Doctor later and various characters and introducing Turlo and Black Guardian and the mutants and everything. But this is a Brigadier story. It's all about him. It's all about part 2 was all about triggering his memory. Could he remember where so-and-so was? And he had a little, you know, he had the TARDIS beacon to get back. It was all about the Brigadier. He was the linchpin to the plot. I mean, I suppose the dating could have been helped a bit more. I mean, 1983 was key, I suppose, to pin it there because he's retired. I know it still hits the dating a bit, but you could have had him in the 60s or something and pushed him way back. I know there was discussion in the early days about the plot, about whether you could have 2 centuries difference in the 2 time zones. And of course, John Nathan Turner said, no, I want one character, you know, to link it together. This story is all about the Brigadier, and it's all about how we can put the Brigadier into it. And it just creates a few loopholes. Some you don't bother with, some you get a bit bothered about. I mean,
well, I suppose though, Brendan, if Mr. Russell had taken up, was available at the time as Ian, the time thing wouldn't have mattered because we don't know where Ian Chesterton was in 77. Yeah. So what they've basically done here, haven't they, is they've got the story written, an actor's unavailable, John's gone, of course, to think, well, okay, we'll put the Brig in it as well. Therefore, you know, I mean, at that time as well, we didn't have this thing about how the Brigadier was supposed to meet each Doctor. It happened from Mawdryn Undead onwards, really, didn't it? You know, there was an expectation from that one on he would meet everybody else. So I think, you know, when it comes to the story, I think had it been Ian Chesterton, we wouldn't be having these discussions today because we've been having them for a long time and it's great. But because it's the Brig, they just didn't want to change the story. Let's face it.
But there's a key.
To me, sorry, but carry on.
No, there's a key element of it being the Brigadier is a lot of this debate about whether this guy in the TARDIS is the Doctor or not, and the fact you had a character in the Brigadier who's seen regeneration and multiple regenerations and understands the process. That whole debate wouldn't have worked with Ian because Ian didn't see anything like that.
Good
he
point.
would have been oblivious to that. So I don't know if it would have been quite as successful, particularly in those scenes, if you had Ian instead of the Brigadier.
It would have been more about Tegan and Nissa's experience from Logopolis into Castrovalva, wouldn't it, really, on that one? And poor old Ian would have been sort of like, what are you talking about? You know, this isn't him. But that element of it as well would have also aided Mawdryn because Ian would have been able to go, that's not the Doctor. What are you talking about? You know, okay, he's got the white hair, but you know, there's other elements there to. But we got the Brig, and the Brig comes into it, and even watching it back for this show, I was absolutely delighted to see Nick. There he is. I love the fact that later on, after the story, of course,
Go on. It wasn't the flashback sequence in episode 2 fabulous, don't you think?
Yeah, and that was the thrill.
I mean, yes and no. Yeah. There were a lot of elements that the Brig didn't see but could remember somehow.
Well, they have updated that in the special edition version, which the clips aren't so good. I don't think.
That's what I was going to ask, actually, since you brought the montage up, which was my highlight. As a Doctor Who fan, when not many videos had been out, I don't think any videos had been out at that stage. This was manna from heaven, wasn't it? To see a full montage in the 20th year. But what I was going to ask about the montage is when you watch the DVD, unlike the broadcast one, as you said, Paul, it's different clips added to. And why have they done that?
Well, there are 2 versions. You've got the original version, which is normal, with the lovely sepia colours through it, which is great. And then you've got the extra version you can add if you can watch if you want to. So they're 2 separate ones. But I agree with Bedway saying the Brigadier didn't witness half of the things that were shown, but that didn't bother me because they were just great clips. Because, like Brenda's saying, I think we hadn't seen any of these before they were on video. So,
can I interrupt this wake? You know, just to put a smile on everybody's face. Look, the creatures and the doctors shown were all met by the Brigadier.
Yes,
that's
of course,
not a particular format. We met them all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that may have been the only clips available. You know, he met the Sidemen, he met the Zygons. Yeah. He met each of the doctors. So, and the incarnation of the first Doctor he met was indeed the one that we were shown. So, what's not to like? Now we're talking about the flashback scene. It became traditional during Davison's 3 years that we got a flashback scene of some description, and this followed on from the ones in Earthshock. This was the only flashback scene that at the time, and even now still has the tendency to move me to tears, because the theme tune, the incidental music used by Paddy Kingsland behind it all, and we're aware of the fact, or we're made aware that something's not right with the Brigadier. He doesn't recognise this Doctor, and it's not because he's regenerated. There's something other than that going on. And then the prelude to this, when we have the whispering of previous companions, the names Joe Grant, Sarah Jane, Liz Shaw, really is designed to pull at your heartstrings. So the sepia tinted, and the idea of the sepia tint is in itself a nod to our nostalgia. That, in conjunction with Paddy Kingsland's excellent incidental music in the background, makes it one of the few lump in the throat moments you get in classic Who, and I just love it to bits. So will you all just please stop? And
I said I liked that section, John. I was praising that section.
Just as well for you, otherwise this is for your head.
Well, let me just bring this back to say I agree with John on that as well, because actually that sequence is integral to the story. It is part of the Brigadier's story here, because there is something going on. I just want to say as well, hello to everybody that's watching us tonight. Thank you very much for everybody that's joining us. If you want to put a comment in, please do. I also want to say hello to Woodhouse122, first time watching us live. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate you being there. Do let us know what you think about this as we talk about it.
Apologise for the grumpiness.
Well, no, it's all opinion. It's all good. But the thing about this is, let's just go and talk. Actually, if we may, please, about how this fits in with Peter Davison. Now, this is, of course, his second season, and I picked this up at the time watching the episodes going out in '83, because in this story, I'm actually, there's something about how Davison is. There's something about his portrayal here, how he's putting through the Doctor, because from the very moment he lands on Mawdryn's ship, he's intense, he's very thoughtful. Something's going on here. And this is a moment where I see, possibly for one of the only times in his era, the Fifth Doctor being mysterious. He's trying to work something out here. He also mentions a few episodes later, it's the elements of chance. Now, I love these scenes where he's actually just being quite quiet and mulling things over in his head without any awareness of Tegan or Nyssa, really. He's not bothering with what they're doing. He's not registering Tegan's comment about the marriage. There's something going on here, and I think Davison pulls it off beautifully.
It is a thoughtful story for him. He's very quietly acted through in this one, but I think he was pondering the small print in his contract.
No, he's not. He's aware that something's going. I think the Fifth Doctor here is aware that something is happening, something bigger is going on, because that whole scene there where he's just mulling around and he's looking at where he is and he's taking everything in. He's starting in a beautiful way, and a lovely captured performance by Davison, I believe, to start putting the pieces together. Think, okay, why am I here? What is happening? What's going on?
Also mentions later on about the level of coincidence, and almost as if some cosmic influence was involved.
That's what I thought.
He is doing a bit of detective work. But the one thing I noticed, especially, is how forgive me again, how grumpy Peter Davison is with his companions, and later with the Brigadier, a character and a friend he's not seen in years, and he's very short with him, and that. So I think Davison has found his vibe, has found his characterization here, and he's found layers to the character here, which aren't always in the script, but being the fine actor that he is, he can lend and add those layers to it.
No, I think he's
Absolutely.
really strong in this. His performance is really strong. I really like Davison in this, and he actually gives a lovely moment when the brigadier doesn't recognise him, and then the brigadier storms off, and he gives this beautiful smile of
A smile, yeah. It's a game.
Woo!
Woo!
Yeah, great, lovely.
Yeah. You get that element that the doctor's suddenly realizing, oh, he's a human, isn't he? He might have just forgotten because he is a little bit old, and there is that beautiful. Oh yeah, come on, you're doing a game on me here. I think that's wonderful as well. And then he just charges after him because, of course, he's got that bond with him, which he has to help break. That's another aspect where I think Davison's performance comes in absolutely fantastic, because when he realized that something is wrong with his old friend here, he has to somehow, without being extremely overt, he's right. What's happened there? And when he mentions the breakdown, it's as though the Davison doctor suddenly goes, yes, absolutely, I know what's going on now. Something's blanked your memory, and it's part of the bigger picture that he doesn't yet understand. He's bringing it all in.
The brigadier getting some treatment, the brigadier flies off the handle too. It's a very mature way of showing the relationship between the two characters, in that they can talk to each other the way the brigadier will still react in the way that he did. I think both Courtney and Davison are at the top of the game in this, and it's really good that Courtney gets to do something other than just the sort of the bit of Mad Mitch Colonel, the old buffoon thing he was doing latterly towards the end of his time as a brigadier. This really is a proper magic return for him as an actor.
It's like they said when he was in Battlefield onwards, he was never kind of developed as he was in Mawdryn. In Mawdryn, in a way, as a fan, it was controversial in my head to think this great, strong military character I remember from the 70s was having a nervous breakdown. That was quite a kind of tangent to go on. It wasn't what I was expecting as a fan. I knew how it linked with the plot, etc. But it challenged Nick, and that was really good because he could play it many ways. The other thing was, I think Doctor Who in 1983 making the centerpiece of its story somebody's nervous breakdown. So Davison had to play it subtly. Davison had to play a few different strands here, and equally Nick Courtney.
I would say that
quite a lot about the brigadier. I think we learned a lot about the brigadier back in Planet of Spiders with that watch that Doris gave him in Brighton. Say no more about that.
Yeah. Go on, Bedri. What are you saying there?
So to go back to Brendan's point, I think perhaps Peter Davison's more thoughtful moments are him trying to work out the plot. But when he gets together with Nick Courtney in scenes, you immediately get this sense of these two characters know each other. They have this relationship. And even though he's forgotten, he still is engaged enough in this person who he's just met, so he thinks, that he invites him into his digs and all that sort of stuff. So immediately their relationship is straight on point, and you see it develop. And I was a bit derogatory about the clips used in that scene where he gets his memory back, but it is a fantastic moment of click and it's back, and now we know where we are, and
it leads to It leads to that wonderful line. So you've done it again, Doctor, which Paul is showing there on the tagline there. So you've done it again, Doctor. That's when the brig's back, because there is something going on there. As a viewer, this. You think, hang on a minute. But at the time, I was always thinking, has the Black Guardian done something? Because here he was. Let's talk about the Black Guardian. Here's the Black Guardian coming back. We'd been aware of the Black Guardian since the Key to Time season. In the Armageddon Factor, the man with the crow on his head swears he's going to go and get the Doctor. And then we have a couple of seasons where the Doctor's avoiding him with the randomizer. The randomizer is dispatched in the Leisure Hive. And from that moment on, I don't know what about you lot, but from that moment on, I'm thinking it's a matter of time. And here we come in season 20, a great season for him to be. And he's back, and he's not a happy bunny rabbit, is he? No.
It would have been good if, I'm just saying, I wanted Black Guardian back, and I was thinking the same as you once the randomizer disappeared. But I would have thought they should have set up a bit of context, because if you were new to Doctor Who, and 20th year, a lot of hype, a lot of advertising, and it was on during the weekdays, a lot of people watching that wouldn't normally watch. who the hell is the Black Guardian? There was no context given. There was no motive given. We know the motive. We know what aggravated him about the Tom Baker Doctor. But he just went straight into, I want him dead. I want him dead. I want him humiliated. I want him. And I think that was a shame that they didn't quite set up the context there of what was the point of the Black Guardian being so blooming angry.
And you know what? I'm going to disagree with you again. I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters for the public because you know what? You've got this guy that somebody appears who is angry. He's all in black, and he's after the Doctor. I think that's all you need to know if you're in the public. And he's about to use this new ginger boy.
It's one-dimensional. You need a character who has a motivation, a background, because he had one. And it didn't need much to be said to actually introduce him properly, because otherwise he's in this black and white kind of, the green and black kind of mosaic effect. He's surreal. He's a bit Celestial Toymaker. And, you know, you need him tangible. You need him there. You need him to be a threat. Well, and, you know, as one of the most powerful beings in the universe to hire for an assassination of Schoolboy. Wow.
Well, put it this way: it's a great way to even keep people in for the next two stories. Because when you think about it, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, he was there for 12 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, 6
weeks. It's a great way.
But look, this is Doctor Who in the early 80s, twice a week, 25-minute episodes. There's only so much you can do to give a backstory before getting on with the story. As you said quite rightly, Brendan, there's an awful lot going on with the Brigadier. This was very much him at the centre of this story. All you need to know about the Black Guardian is dress him in black, give him a bit of Bet Lynch bling, stick a crow in his napper, and then put him out there and have him say, as he does do, I may not be seen to act in this. So
mystery.
The viewers don't need to know why. And in that one line, he goes, this is a baddie. He can't be seen to act in this, so he's getting this young boy. The bigger mystery, I think, is with Turlough, and this is a criticism I do have of the story. I'm sorry to segue off the Black Guardian.
No, go ahead.
Are you being negative, John?
Introduced to Turlough, the Doctor accepts him without asking questions about, you know a great deal about this, and you're on Earth. Why are you on Earth? He just seems to be accepted straight away as an alien on Earth without very much questioning. So that would be that's more problematic for me than the Black Guardian with all his paraphernalia saying, "I'm a baddie." And you're doing the bad stuff for me. I'm fine with that. The Turlough stuff, more problematic.
My problem with the Black Guardian was the way he was dressed, because I don't know if anyone remembers this, but when I was a kid growing up in the 70s, there was a show called Finger Bobs. And he looks like he's got one of the puppets on his head, you know, and I think that's a bit unfortunate. He looked better in negative form, or black and white, when he was in Armageddon Factor.
You know, guys, maybe you guys can help. I could have sworn that those outfits for Valentine Dial and later on in the season by Cyril Luckham were worn before, and apparently they weren't, because you look back at Armageddon Factor now, and you look back at Rebus Operation. So how did I recognize this? How did I recognize these outfits, thinking, oh, that's the same thing he wore in Baker's time?
No, even though I had seen it, I knew it was new costumes. Then I knew it was new, and I found the crow on the napper odd, but you know, strangely Doctor Who-ish. You know, it is what it was. Look, this was the 80s. You know,
but the White Guardian has the dove. There is an equilibrium because the White Guardian, of course, has the dove. But yeah, I mean, they are very fanciful. They are very 80s. They're very big. You know, they're getting onto that sort of stuff. But I know where you're coming from on that particular one.
It's the black Stetson thing. The guy in the black Stetson is
black
the bad
and white.
You know, instead of Stetsons, you've got birds. It works.
Yeah.
And you get
the whole thing about the whole. I mean, it doesn't really matter what they're wearing, because the impact of the Guardians is felt to this very day. You do get them mentioned in fan fiction. You get them mentioned on shows like we're doing now. You get them mentioned continually up there. Maybe not as high as Omega, but certainly within the top 6, maybe, of characters that could this be this? Could this be that? Whenever there's something celestial, like, we don't know what's happening in the 60th. We're all assuming it's the Toymaker, but some people are saying, no, it's the Guardian. It could be the Black Guardian. Yeah. I mean, the impact of those characters was immense. And it was down, I think, to not just the writing, but the portrayal of course, Valentine Dial, the man in black, Literally, he was a famous actor, even to those of us young enough not able to have tuned into the radio stories that were decades before us. And that voice, and of course, coming on the back of the Armageddon Factor for myself, he terrified me in the Armageddon Factor, and that negative effect did not help.
That voice took at least 18 a day to perfect. Well, Valentine was puffing away to get that voice just as good as it was. It was absolutely fabulous. And Valentine was only, he was seen for about 90 seconds or so in the Armageddon Factor. First of all, presenting to be the White Guardian, then put into negative as the Black Guardian. So he never actually got to wear a black costume. This is the first time he gets to wear that, and I think it works splendidly.
He got some great lines as well. I mean, there's some lines in Mawdryn Undead that just, are just vivid in your memory. So, waking or sleeping, I'm with you. He said,
waking or sleeping.
And the fact, I mean, as a former teacher, the fact that you had the headmaster in Turlough's bedroom suddenly turning into the Black Guardian. I mean, that's a horror
really
show.
good moment.
Yeah, that's really good.
And then it was the line again, because just before he switches, I know it's a different actor, but are you absolutely sure that that threat suddenly from the headmaster? Are you absolutely sure about the moral dilemma? No. But yes, I liked it. You see, I loved it when the Black Guardian then appeared in the actual bedroom. Actually appeared. That threat is what I wanted, a little bit more of that. But no, God, Valentine Dial, I loved him in Secret Army. He was the Doctor in that, with the Resistance. No, I mean, you mentioned certain voices in Doctor Who, Sutek in Pyramids of Mars.
Gabrielle Wolfe,
the Omega voice in Three Doctors. And then you come to this one, Valentine Dial. I mean, we had to wait from Armageddon Factor, but then we had the little clip in Logopolis when he stood out a mile in that montage, and then you get him here.
Taffy Hale is saying here he reminds him of a character from The Labyrinth. Interesting.
Was that the Ron Moody series? Was it Ron Moody? Was it? Yeah.
I thought it was the film.
Nobody?
I don't know.
I thought you meant there's
and then he's saying, the voice of Valentine. The voice of that. Yeah, I mean, that's why he was hired, and that's why he was wonderful, and that's why he scared the generation to death. One thing we do have to talk about with Mawdryn Undead as well, before we go any further, is I have to be honest, this was the first time I knew that we were getting a new companion. This was from the Daily Mail back at the time, Doctor Who's double agent. I had no idea, of course, pre-internet. So John's lovely relationship with the press there, and this coming out just out of the blue on one of the pages in the paper, this is when I went, hang on a minute. And what they made it out to be in this, typical sensationalism from the press, back then, I know it still goes on today, but back then, he was replacing Nyssa. So I have to be honest, I was a little bit peeved by this, because I had a little sort of crush on Nyssa. I really liked Nyssa. I didn't really want to. I didn't know she was leaving until I saw this, and that's this fella's taking over. Where's Tegan? What's going on? The amount of questions. So I was really into. Then Doctor Who Monthly clarified this. He's going to be appearing in this show, and then Mark Strickson turns up and wastes a year basically in the show. But controversial. So what did we? I mean, you mentioned something about it earlier as well, John. Let's expand on what you're saying there about the myths around Turlough in this story. Because yes, here's an alien trapped on Earth, and the Doctor accepts that very, very quickly.
It does. It's one of they have no origins for Turlough. At this point, it hadn't been written about. They hadn't thought about it. He was going to be an alien who was working against the Doctor. The Doctor didn't know about this, and he was to be introduced and become a part of the TARDIS team. That was the basic premise, and poor Peter Grimwade was given that to add to his story, and that's fine. But unfortunately, as I say, this is one of my problems with the story, in that the Doctor just meekly accepts the fact that Turlough is an alien in a public school in the south of England, and
because it happens every day, of course.
Of course, he doesn't ask him, okay, why are you here? Turlough is spouting stuff about deviations along the warp ellipse throughout this, and the Doctor's just meekly accepting it without batting an eyelid. If I had a few deviations along my warp ellipse, I would be I'd be probably ringing
The Doctor, John, surely.
Yes, indeed. But so that's a plot for if they had just introduced the fact, okay, you're here. Why are you here? They could have done a bit of something in there without labouring the point. But it is a bit of a plot hole in terms of the introduction of the Turlough character. I didn't know Turlough was going to become a companion before the press. It was in the Celestial Toy Room, which was the magazine or the newsletter of the Doctor Appreciation Society, of which I was a stalwart member. So I did know Nyssa was leaving, and I did know that Turlough was coming in. And I was surprised at the fact that it was going to overlap for a while, because I thought the old 3-companion TARDIS thing lesson had been learned, but obviously it hadn't.
And that's a tale for another time when we get to Terminus. Indeed.
I mean, when we discussed the start of the 6th Doctor and Twin Dilemma and a little bit in Attack, that kind of brusque, aggressive, almost violent persona that Colin Baker, was challenged with, because it made people a bit, oppositional to him to a degree. Turlough as a brand new character, I mean, yes, I know he's a double agent and all that nonsense, but the thing is, it wasn't a good start for him for the longevity after that trilogy was over, because you didn't like him, you didn't trust him. He lied to Hippo, he lied to various people. You didn't know his background. He was an awful 1920s style public schoolboy. I mean, I couldn't gel with it as a kid. I thought, oh, here we are, back to, to serve them all my days. We've got Matthew Waterhouse again. We've gone for that 1920s style stereotype public schoolboy, telling each other off over, being fat, hippo, and all the rest of it. And so you didn't like him as a character. You didn't trust him. And so I thought I really didn't like Turlough all the way blooming through, because he'd had such a start where he was a double agent, but then he's a friend. I also didn't understand by the end of the episode, I agree with John in a few different ways, because at the end of the episode, Davison says, you've already joined us, when he kind of is in the TARDIS, and you seem to have already joined the team. Plus, with that crystal communicator, there was a point in the time capsule when Davison had picked it up in the bedroom, hadn't he? He'd found it in the blanket. And obviously very suspicious about what the hell is this technology. And as we said, he's acting as short. He's trying to, join the pieces here in the plot. And then he gets to the time capsule and throws it towards Turlough, yours, I presume. And he has a look on him, quite angry. And you're thinking, he is suspicious of Turlough. So why have he allowed him to join the TARDIS?
I want to bring that point in here, because I've got this in my notes, because that's an interesting point from back in 1983 itself, as well as on any rewatch. You have that pivotal moment. Now, going back to what I was saying before, oh yes, everything's connected on this show. Where I was going, the Doctor is thoughtful. So he's thoughtful from the moment he steps onto into Mawdryn's ship. He's thoughtful going through all the way through the ship. Then he gets to Earth. The Brigadier turns up with his memory gone, basically. He has to bring that back. Then he's got this mysterious kid that's around him, who he identifies very quickly. You're not human. I mean, you'd be able to smell that surely as well. You're not of terror. Then he finds the crystal. So he's piecing it all together. So in a sense, it's part of that whole development of the Davison character, surely, in Mawdryn Undead, where he's actually trying to find out what is going on. None of these people that are actually around me here are necessarily relevant to where am I being pushed into, and that actually turns out to be, of course, Mawdryn.
It could be argued that you could say that the 5th Doctor was ahead of the game, and that all the clues he picked up about Turlough, and that's why he wasn't asking him about his whereabouts and why he was there, and he gets the little crystal tap thing that he throws back at Turlough, that he's aware of the fact that something is going on, and let's confront this now and keep him on board to find out exactly what is going on here.
Yes, bigger picture.
Because, as I said earlier, he made a reference to some cosmic influence. So it may well be that Davison's ahead, there's something going on here. And so we'll have Turlough with us so I can stay with this. Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer, just so he knows. This is never perhaps made explicit.
It's possible he recognised the cube.
It should have been made.
It's possible he recognised the cube as a...
Oh, Paul, are you there? No, okay. Well, what were you saying there, John?
I'll just cut in. There's a great shot where the Doctor appears behind Turlough, and he's just got this look on his face of, yeah, I know you're up to something. And and you're right. I think obviously there's an understanding or an appreciation for something going on beyond this alien in a public. It's not brilliantly well. It's not explained at all why he's there, how he's there, anything like that. But I don't think leaving him on Earth would give him the answers to the questions. So he's got to take him with him.
It's making sure I say, keep your enemies closer than your friends. I think that, although it's not really, it's because the whole 12 episodes is written by different people and perhaps not terribly well script edited. As a result of this, the message doesn't get through that very much Davison is aware of the involvement of some greater cosmic force, maybe up to.
What would you say, John? What would you say, John, that while we're kind of trying to see this kind of development of the Fifth Doctor character as maybe ahead of the game, he's playing the chess well here. By the end of episode 3, he's ballsed it up completely and he's been stalemated. So if he is slightly ahead of the game, which I'd love to think, because I do like the Davison Doctor, he's absolutely walked himself into checkmate.
He has. And I think that's lovely for his character. Remember, the Fifth Doctor is flawed, which the Sixth Doctor corrects in a sense, because he recognizes actually, bang, that was just, I'm not doing all that again. But, the Davison Doctor is, after the fourth as incarnation as well, he is flawed. And he's trying to do what he would normally do. And I love this. And I love this conversation we're having, because what's going on here, of course, is that the way I see this is Davison is piecing it all together. Yes, I think he's looking at the bigger picture. He's looking at these elements and he gets it wrong, because what he doesn't realize is that Tegan and Nyssa in 1977 and have met, let's bring him into his very own show, they have met Mawdryn, who they absolutely think at some point is the Doctor. They get him mixed up for the Doctor. So he can't possibly know what's going on, because the TARDIS has been put into 1977. He doesn't know what's going on in 1977. He has to get back to the ship in order to actually come back and actually see everybody. So it's a case of being able to say, right, okay, I love that flaw. Don't you guys? Are you not getting that from it, or is it just
I like
me?
his vulnerability. I do. And in the classic series,
Great impression,
Doctor
John.
is probably the most vulnerable. His face, when he realised, there's 8 mutants, he's done 4 regenerations, and he can't take the companions with him in the TARDIS. So I want to come
to that later on as well. That's an important point. Don't let me forget.
I do actually think he looks very lost, defeated, vulnerable, and that was new for the Doctor, really.
That's what really made the cliffhanger, didn't it? That made the cliffhanger really work, because he wasn't flippant about it. It was really serious. The cards were on the table, and it looked like that his time was up. It was great. Fantastic.
Well, let's come back to that a little bit later, because I want to talk about Mawdryn at this point, because we're jumping ahead to a really pivotal point in the story a bit later, and it's an important point as fans as well. So I want to come back to that. But let's talk about Mawdryn, and first of all, let's acknowledge the talent that was David Collins. Come on. This was an actor who was known to practically every generation watching television throughout the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. He was a huge theatre player as well. He was extremely well respected in his art, in his industry. And of course, for us as science fiction fans, Mr. Collins was a giant, because he was at conventions, he did everything. I don't want to list all the stuff. I mean, the standout performances for me is not only his appearances in Robots of Death, which we've also covered as a review, but of course Sapphire and Steel, where he played Silver. Beautifully. All those other sci-fi and fantasy shows he was in. My goodness. And I was just so pleased to have him back as Mawdryn. But the performance at Mawdryn, let's talk about David's performance as Mawdryn. What do you guys think of this?
It's a great performance. It's really, really strong. I think he plays the almost regenerated Doctor really well. It's a great, because it's kind of a little bit odd, because the characters believe he's the Doctor. It doesn't really clarify whether or not he had regenerated, but Mawdryn plays it like he is the Doctor, and he plays it really well. And David Collins would have been a great Doctor, fabulous Doctor.
Oh, yeah, he's another one of those cases. He was a Doctor we never had, because he would have been brilliant, and he would have taken it running and gone off with it, because he would have understood the character as well. I love the point that you're making there as well about now we're getting into the complexes of being in two different time zones. So we've got the Brigadier and Davison's Doctor and Turlough in 83. We've now got the Brigadier, and we've got Mawdryn, and we've got Deegan and Nyssa in 1977. But the fact that they encounter Mawdryn in a burnt state, you know, he looks terrible. Great makeup there as well from the makeup team. Absolutely wonderful. I think it's an easy thing to mistake David Collins for Peter Davison. Have a look at this.
Yeah,
it's not bad.
Apart from the spaghetti, perhaps.
The spaghetti we give away. Yeah.
But you could actually, you know, if you were in that situation, undergoing this stress, and you're not Tegan, you could actually be able to say, well, we know the Doctor regenerates. It's set in stone at this point now in Mawdryn Undead that you could actually take on the form of another person, not a humanoid. Time Lords can regenerate into another one of the people that they are allegedly supposed to look over. So that's quite an interesting theory. That's never taken up ever again, by the way. But, you know, you can almost feel the angst here, because you've got Nyssa on the, you know, on a borderline here. The Brigadier going, well, it's a bit difficult as well. And then Tegan who's, no, definitely not. I mean,
I think it would have been even better had they not had scenes with Peter Davison alongside. So the viewer then starts to question, well, actually, has something gone wrong? Has something happened in that transmat? Is this a new Doctor that we're seeing? And I think if they'd have added that doubt in the viewer's mind, it would have been even more effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, because what got me, I have to say, you know, we always have to be honest to when we first watched it. There was a moment when I jumped thinking, oh my God, but actually because the costume was nothing like the cricket outfit, I didn't kind of get it. I know what they were trying to do, and, you know, I'll buy into that, but the fact that if he'd had burned cricket trousers on or something, you know, that as a teenager, that didn't get me.
And he's
his
underpants have question marks on them, do they? So
I love the fact that Mawdryn is starting to reveal who Mawdryn is, because as a viewer, we know this isn't the Doctor. We know, no, you're being hoodwinked here. Tegan's right, stay with Tegan. But Mawdryn is taking this really nasty, I'm taking the advantage of here. This is a TARDIS, and I need a Time Lord. So wherever there's a TARDIS, there's a Time Lord not far.
Do you see
he knows he's got to get back to the ship.
Do you see it as nasty? I don't. I see him as seizing an opportunity. After all, that's what the purpose of using the transmat is, to get closer to planet and send all them down there. So he's seizing the chance that he has there. The issue I have, I think, is with the whole spaghetti head thing, is that I don't understand why that was done, apart from the shock value of the end of episode 1. Was they thought a mutative catalyst, I think, is the phrase. That's not easy to say if you don't have your teeth in.
Not easy to say anytime. Come on.
Absolutely. Especially after a tin of spaghetti, which so you get that initial shock at the end of episode 1, and then it becomes a bit of a, you know, an albatross. Not like
it's just the way they are.
Not like the one the Black Guardian is wearing on his head, but it's just the way the aliens are. But for David Collins to act his way through that is kudos to the man, because it's fantastic. Because he manages to gain a sympathetic character throughout that, as indeed do the other speaking parts as well. They're very, very good at that. As for the costumes, I think that's deliberately designed to give them that gliding, flowing motion akin to the Daleks, where they're all paddling away underneath, but seemingly smooth.
I thought they were fashion victims. I thought they'd obviously gone and got trapped and were fashion victims. I mean, the plot could have been made more concise, because basically it was 8 mutants who wanted to find a celestial dignitas. And you know, that was basically in essence what the story was about. And it's a shame they couldn't go to Switzerland or somewhere, and it would have been a quicker story. But you know, it was all about
it's a parallel.
But I thought those pastel, the whole story was pastel, wasn't it? The mutants were pastel.
Yeah, that is,
I mean, what I found intriguing is in the script they called them creatures, and then they switched it to mutants, and in the credits it was mutants. And yet, I think, to answer your point, John, the spaghetti head and all the rest of it was quite gruesome, really, as a kid to watch. But then as you went down the body, you then thought this is a kind of, you know, Vivienne Westwood's fashion thing. It mixed. And
see, so I didn't get that. I didn't get what I got from this at all. Was, as the Fifth Doctor points out, these are beings that tried illegally and stupidly to make themselves Time Lords. Now, bearing in mind we'd had the Time Lords in Arc of Infinity just a couple of stories before, I saw this sort of thing about they're the failed lot. They tried to do this. It's not allowed to happen. And now they're paying the price for it. Woodhouse122 is saying here, I like that Mawdryn and the other mutants don't want to take over the world. They just want to finally die. Absolutely different element to the story. You're absolutely right there, because all they wanted to do was die. And this is where Mawdryn again understands that he could possibly have an opportunity here, because of course what he does is he passes on a mutated virus to our two companions here, doesn't he? So whichever way they're going to try and get out of it, the Doctor is trapped in a loop he didn't see.
And again, you have so this story, apart from dealing with a major character having a nervous breakdown, we're now still dealing with euthanasia, voluntary euthanasia, people looking for a dignified exit. And so these are quite mature subjects to introduce to an early evening audience of young children sitting there with their families. And you can imagine the sort of discussions that may well have led to, because Woodhouse 22 is correct. It isn't about conquest or domination. It's about just seeking peace. And Mawdryn talks us, all we wanted was death. And the Doctor agrees on that. It's unfortunate that the Doctor has to give up his lives in the process up until the zap and the Blinovitch limitation effect as happens. But mature adult themes at 6:55 on a midweek evening with families watching. You've got to give. People often accuse John Nathan Turner of pantomime. That's not pantomime. That's not taking.
Well,
you never got that. You never got that in Crossroads, did you?
Well, no. We do have to mention
Chewy's haggis.
We do have to mention, because we mentioned John, we will mention Eric Saywood, of course, who was the script editor as well. Given an awful lot to do with season 20, we have to be honest with that. A lot of the time now, if you look at what Eric says now, he was obviously unaware of, or maybe it was too much for him, a whole season of returning this and returning that and celebrating this and celebrating that. Maybe it was too much for him there, but I think he's done a cracking job with what he had here and what he was pushing forward to, on all the limitations that we actually know. It's
a really interesting take, because I think in that situation you'd expect the villain trying to gain eternal life. He's already done that bit, and
didn't like it,
and he's regretting it because he's trapped in this constant mutation. And it's a different take on what you would have assumed would
and
be.
A few stories later, Barusa's trying to get it for himself.
There are, if you look at season 20 as a whole, of which, of course, we will all soon be able to do with the Blu-ray box set release, which is coming very soon. But there are certain elements that run all the way through, isn't there? There's the Time Lords that run through. There's the whole thing about infinity that runs through. There's immortality that runs through. Now, I know that was totally intentional, but when you watch it, there's these little things that go through all the way through, as though it was the original series story arc. And it's just a shame that they didn't understand that they were doing it, really, and it was just all chance. Let's move on to okay, I want to talk about this. Great conversation here, everybody. Thank you for watching us here at Who's Views Reviews. We are reviewing, of course, the 1983 story Mawdryn Undead, and I want to bring in, now this is a point I always refer to, and certainly have referred to in recent years, constantly, all the time. 8 of them, 8 of me. Now, if we're talking continuity here, if we're talking canon here, this is the story which absolutely 100% lays down the law that this is the 5th incarnation of our favorite Time Lord, and he has regenerated only 4 times. And that's why he's extremely cautious with this blooming machine, which has been stolen. The regenerator has been stolen from Gallifrey, according to the story, by the mutants, which is a story in itself. My goodness, I cannot believe all these years later, we still haven't had either a big finish or a comic strip, which shows how they got into the capital and nicked this thing, because that's a huge achievement. Well done, them. But anyway, here we go. But this is so important for me. This is the Doctor saying, I've only got 8 lives left, which is something which has been conveniently forgotten in recent years, and it really grates on me. Guys, 8 of me, 8 of them, 8 of me. What do you guys think?
Well, hold on, I'm going to come in here and say, you're right, absolutely, it does do that. It sets the Deadly Assassin, sets the 12 regeneration limit, and this story confirms the fact that despite what the Brain of Morbius showed us, that this is the Doctor's 5th incarnation. However, in terms of regeneration and its limits, only a few short stories later in the 5 Doctors, the Time Lords offer the Master a complete new life cycle. So, yeah, you can have 13 bodies and 12 regenerations, but that's not necessarily the end for a Time Lord. As
we know that we know that from the Five Doctors. But at this point,
I know. Yeah, what I'm saying is, but let's ignore the whole timeless palaver that Chibnall that's just nonsense. But in terms of the classic show, even within the parameters we had, we now get confirmed this is the Fifth Doctor, the fourth regeneration. He confirms that to the First Doctor in the Five Doctors. But they do, in terms of their offer to the Master, confirm the fact that there are ways to circumvent this 13-body limit within. And that's only a few stories later. So they must have known what was coming down the line.
Well, they knew. I mean, I'm sure at some point they would have known that. Well, hang on a minute, we've got the sixth actor coming in now, and at that, and don't forget, in '83, this show was secure. It was 100% secure. A couple of years later, we were all stunned as what happened, but we're not going into that at this point. But at this point in '83, this show was secure. That it was going to run, and it was going to run. It was going to come back and be renewed every year. And I'm sure that was put in there for future. I mean, certain things have been put into the show around about John's time, especially as for the future to be picked up on should people want to. And I'm sure that's what happened with the Master here. But what, about with Mawdryn Undead, it's there. This is it. So if people, if other fans are talking about canon, this is the one I always refer them to say, look, that's the fifth.
Yes.
Isn't this? I mean, this is the classic versus the new Who problem, isn't it? I mean, none of us, I'm assuming, liked the Timeless Children.
Oh no,
but,
no.
But the missile, the grenade that Chris Chibnall put into that story was that the original Doctor, William Hartnell, couldn't remember that there'd been previous ones. And so I'm with you, JT, all the way. I want evidence to prove, there's 12, that's it. But the trouble is, he's tampered with it with one line, which is all those classic Doctors couldn't remember that they wrote the original ones. And that's the swine of what he's done.
Anyway, but when it comes to this story, I think it fits, and I think it works beautifully because you suddenly feel, and we'll go back to this point here where the Fifth Doctor has misjudged what he's expecting to happen. He's not as clever as his future incarnation number 7. He's not as good as him, but here he goes. He set this story up. He thinks he knows what he's got in, and then suddenly he's faced with Mawdryn. He's faced with the fact Mawdryn has passed on a genetic term to his companions. He's faced with the fact that Mawdryn has outdone him. He's played the game. The Fifth Doctor has lost. And then suddenly Mawdryn saying, give us the power of Time Lord. Help us to die. My goodness, did I not feel the chills that very night when this was broadcast? And you mentioned it earlier, John. You do actually think, how is he going to get out of this one? And that, for me, is what a cliffhanger is all about.
Super duper. It really is. And that's one of my love for this show. There's high stakes. The real high stakes, probably as high stakes as we've had for a long time. I mean, you can get the sort of, Logopolis. I love Logopolis, and you get this end of the universe thing. Yeah, okay, that's this week, and last week it'll be the end of the galaxy, and the next week it's the end of the solar system. That's what Doctor Who does. That's fine. But this is very personal to the Doctor. This is his life cycle, and he's prepared to sacrifice it for his friends. And in that moment, that's the Doctor's character unpacked for you. Now, they do something very, very similar at the Tennant regeneration, where he doesn't die because he's saving the universe. He's dying because he's saving Bernard Cribbins. That's what leads to that. And in terms of this, the Doctor is not prepared to sacrifice just this life, but his subsequent lives. Commit, as somebody says, but that's murder 8 times over. I think it's Tegan that says that.
Yes, it is, yeah.
You have to let that happen just to allow his 2 friends to continue their travels and leave the spaceship. And that is the Davison Doctor, and indeed the Doctor in a nutshell. And that's why I love this story so much. If you look beyond, I say, some pretty naff direction, some pretty in-your-face 80s sets and costumes, there's an awful lot of layers to this.
We have
this Courtney and Valentine Dial. What's not to like?
We have to also say that, in a sense, what the Doctor does here foreshadows his eventual doom, because he does the same thing for Perry.
Perry,
the
yeah.
following year.
yeah.
He
And
puts
as
it
you
like,
say, whether they knew or not, they're foreshadowing, and there is an arc there to be seen.
there is. I mean, that the infallible Fifth Doctor. I mean, you
Mhm.
know, coming after the mighty, impressive, powerful, confident fourth, this one has been, you know, this one, and we're seeing it in there. He's trying to live up to what he's done before, what to do, you know, but you know,
And he's
I
he's
always ask the
almost,
question: would the other doctors, would the other four doctors have got this so wrong?
Maybe not.
I found he was almost in episode 3. He was almost harassed into that moment as well, because they
Yeah.
were stuck in the TARDIS. They all looked to him, and then it was actually Tegan, and I'll grant Tegan one thing. She did at the end say thank you to him. But before then, she said, well, we can't stay in the TARDIS forever. So in other words, she had a countdown thing going, and she thought, we might as well get out there, and you're going to have to face your, you know, your decision. That was, and then the Brigadier Nissa said, well, Doctor, and it was like, is the Doctor allowed time to think here? Because all his companions are saying, hurry up and give your lives away, because we don't like aging and regressing.
It's only 10 minutes to the end of the episode. He doesn't have time. But they're human beings, or Atrakanites. You know, I mean, of course they're going to be selfish, and of course they're going to pressurize the dog. That's the point. But Davidson, you know, you can, in his face, you see the weight of this decision. You see the effect it's going to have. He realizes he's no longer going to be able to regenerate. The next accident or clash he has will be his last. But ultimately, for the sake of selfish humanoids who are asking him to do it, he does it. In the Tom Baker era, I don't dare say that the flashbang wallop ending that ultimately happens would have happened anyway. There would have been some mega whiz with K9 and Romana to prevent the Doctor having to give his regenerations up. But in this, the Doctor volunteers and agrees to do it, and that's what makes this Doctor different.
But yeah, as somebody comes to this this story later than we all did, did you get this element from Peter's performance coming through as the Fifth Doctor? Did you see a difference in the Fifth Doctor to any of the others you may have encountered?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with John. You know, if this was, you know, season 17, say, it would have been a flick of the sonic screwdriver, some technical wizardry, and they would have gone off on their merry way. And I think it's a really smart use of the regeneration. And that's why the Timeless Children is so stupid, because it removes the drama. It removes any jeopardy for the main character. And this is all about jeopardy for the main character. But as you say, you know, he's happy to sacrifice his future regenerations for the sake of his friends. Okay, it's a bit contrived, because there's no idea that this mutation has been passed on until they need him to come back. So you spend 10 minutes trying to force him into this decision. But once he's there, like you say, it's that vulnerability of the Fifth Doctor. And I think it works really well, and Davison plays it brilliantly.
Oh, totally. I mean, this is really where the Fifth Doctor's in his groove. For me, for Davison's performance in Mawdryn is one of the standout performances, and it's the one that's constantly overlooked. But as I say, we get all of that stuff in the TARDIS right in episode 1. The moment he sets foot on that set for Mawdryn's ship, there's a different element of the Fifth Doctor there. I'm rewatching this for God knows what time to review for this show. I really, really appreciated what Peter was doing here, putting that extra element in, and I just wish he'd been able to push that a little bit more. It's not really there in the next story. It's a little bit there in Enlightenment to an extent, but I can see the start here of, we might not know it's going to be this sort of trilogy, if you like, a loose theme trilogy, but for him it's going to be. For the Doctor, this is a case of, I have to see this through now. Albeit with the case that there's this one little bit where he doesn't get it and he gets it wrong with Mawdryn. But when he overcomes that, I think that's where we get to the point where he welcomes Turlough on the TARDIS to be able to say, as you said earlier, Badria, you have to stay now because I need you where I can see you.
I mean, as a teenager, I have to say, I loved Tom Baker, but to see Davison's, he won you over because he was actually quite human and fallible, and therefore there was more engagement with it in that respect. You kind of knew Tom Baker would get out of trouble, so to speak. But the Davison Doctor was so different, and it must have been so challenging for Peter Davison to underplay in many ways and have to be more subtle because, you know, everybody refers to Tom Baker, the Fourth Doctor, blah, blah, blah. And he deliberately played it different, of course, but to play it in a subtle way is a hell of a challenge for an actor because you are going to be constantly compared to Tom Baker. And yet, as a teenager, I really related to him. I really got his Doctor.
Yeah. Well, Peter was very on time, wasn't it? He was. Don't you think, Paul? You watch those episodes now, they're very 80s, and Peter brought in a very modern 80s refreshing Doctor.
He did, as what we said before, the kind of the JNT era after Tom had left. Season 1920 was really a renaissance of the show, and they gave it a real breath of fresh air. But I was going to go back to what Brendan said and John said a little bit about Davison wanting to, you know, he was thinking about leaving because he wasn't really keen on the stories and stuff like that. I wonder how the story would be if it was directed by someone else. If he had the energy of someone like Graham Harper or if Peter Grimwade were able to direct it himself, I wonder how different the show would have been and what the pace would have been like or the action of it compared to, say, like Kees Van Jazani or something like that. You know what I mean? And I think maybe that made Davison change his mind and maybe he would have stayed for a fourth year. Who knows?
Yeah. I think you're right there, Paul. I'm a great fan. He's a lovely wit and raconteur, is Peter Moffat. But, you know, he points the camera and directs. And, for example, a very basic thing we'll talk about in terms of the direction. The spaceship is meant to be vast. And these people are supposed to be around various different layers. Now, all he has to do is change the lighting slightly, and we'll get the impression that we're on different floors. He doesn't do that. So all that plays out is that we're running around on one studio floor with a few props, and it actually looks quite luxurious. It's pointed out that this is supposed to be a luxury liner or a cruise ship, but all he has to do is to give us the notion that we're looking at Lethbridge Stewart from 1977 on an upper level, and then dim the lights a bit to show us we're looking at the 1983 version on a lower level. And he can't be bothered doing that. And I say can't be bothered quite deliberately because any other director would just go, right, guys, hands on knobs, let's have the lights down, and that would happen. But he doesn't do it. Now that, just because he wants to be on time, he wants to get it finished, and he wants that reputation. Fine, that's good. But other directors, and I'm not talking about super duper ones like Graham Harper or Peter Grimwade, but even the likes of Fiona Cumming, I'm sure would have thought about, you know, let's tell the viewers we're on a different level by changing the lighting. And something as simple as that was lacking in terms of the direction. I could go on for hours about other aspects of this, but this is one of my favourite shows, unfortunately, despite Moffat's direction and not because of it.
Mm-hmm. It's all very interesting, this one, isn't it? Because we're now looking at this with hindsight. We're all sort of blah, 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 so many years old. I was 13 when it was first broadcast back in '83. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Every single fourth episode, every of the 4 episodes, I loved it all. I was so excited about it. I actually found Mawdryn himself very intriguing. I loved the 5th Doctor in this. I loved the whole feel of it, the look of it. It was great to see the Brigadier back. I was very excited about that. Didn't expect him in 2 forms, obviously. Very excited about the Black Guardian. And then you get this Turlo guy coming along with his great big Easter egg and just thinking, right, so where's this going to go? What's happening here? And it set it up for what was coming. I love this. I absolutely love this story. And it's time now
to find out. Before we go, just that Paddy Kingsland, a special mention after Keith McCulloch bashing away during Remembrance of the Daleks and giving it all he's got. Paddy Kingsland does a fair bit of giving it all he's got here too, but he's got some lovely melodies in here. You know, we talked about the montage sequence and what he does there, but there's some lovely themes about the school and with the mutants and the Brigadier wandering about the ship. It's just lovely. Paddy was always one of my favourites, if not my favourite, of the radiophonic workshop composers, and I think he does a brilliant job here.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was just about to lead into that, because this is one of the soundtracks that I still remember to this very day.
The music when they steal the car is
Yep. But it's also that walking around Mawdryn's ship. You know, when they get there, it's the drama that comes in later. It's that beautiful music you already spoke about when the Brigadier regains his memories. These are soundtracks to our lives in a sense. And I know, and I'll be home. I can be walking down. There are several soundtracks. If I'm walking down the street, that'll come to mind. Mawdryn Undead is one of them. The Mark of the Rani is another one. There are certain elements that will come to me, and I'll just go, "Oh, wow." And I think that's because I obviously not only was I learning to put the VHS in the machine back then, but I also did them on the old C90s. So you were listening to them all the time, you know. But I'm glad you brought that up because and of course now you can get it via various downloads and CDs and stuff like that, so you can relive the soundtrack there. So yeah, let's pick up Baddy Kingston on that wonderful score. Did you guys find the same thing?
Oh, it's a great score. I'm a big fan, like John. I'm a big fan of Paddy's. My favourite's Legopolis. His score for that is amazing. But this Mawdryn's great too. A great, almost like a rock score. It's fantastic.
Yes.
And then when the ship's approaching in episode 1, when the ship blows up at the end, the score really works. And when the introduction to Turlo in the TARDIS, he has a kind of, it's building up to a climactic thing. I like his little touches all the way through, and all those that John mentioned as well. I do like Paddy Kinston. I thought it was a really good score.
Yeah.
Wonderful. It's time for this. Yes, it's scores on the TARDIS doors. It's that time now where we give our scores out of 10 for Mawdryn Undead. We'll start with John.
Oh, wait, would you get me doors open? It'll come as no surprise to any of you that Mawdryn Undead is not only my favourite story of season 20. Ignore these old wives who got grumpily bemoaning. Ignore them. They know what they talk.
You're deluding.
Or sleeping. Mawdryn Undead will always have 10 on those TARDIS doors.
Fantastic. Badria, how many out of 10 for you?
I will go 6.
Oh, okay. Paul.
I'm going to copy Badria and go for 6 as well.
Brendan.
I'm going to go with where I started in this, 5.
Fabulous. Okay, so 5 from Brendan there. For myself, I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10 because I still love it and I still rate it. And it is still one of those I will put on a Sunday afternoon if it's peeing down outside. And I'm quite happy to watch it. This is
Stingy.
This is who's. Shut up. This is who's. Next time on Who's Views Reviews, we are going to be bringing in the 8th incarnation of our favorite Time Lord as we look at the TV movie. Yes, the one that starred Paul McGann for one night only in 1996. We're going to be having a look at that as part of our celebration of our favorite Time Lord's 60th anniversary.
Wake up, John.
Someone give John a nudge.
Be very interested to see what he wants to say, what John says about this. So don't forget to like and subscribe. Please join us next time as we go live and we talk about all things the TV movie. I think that's going to be a very exciting one. Guys, thank you so much for joining me here on this reviews for Mawdryn Undead. Coming soon to a Blu-ray box set to you. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to please like the video, do subscribe to the channel, have a look at all our playlists, and we'll be back very soon with more from reviews with the TV movie. So we'll see you again very soon. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.